Garden Lodge sits quietly on Logan Place in Kensington, London, behind a plain green door you could walk past without even noticing. And yet, for 30 years after Freddie Mercury died inside, that same door became something else entirely. Fans covered it in letters, messages, names, and love. So much, in fact, that when it was finally sold, it went for over £400,000. Almost what Freddie paid for the entire house back in 1980. But here's the thing, the door was never really the story. What was behind it was. Because what people eventually discovered inside the house revealed something far more personal than any concert, interview, or biography ever could. So what exactly was Freddie Mercury hiding in plain sight all those years? Most people think of Garden Lodge as the place where Freddie died. But very few understand what he built inside it during the 11 years he lived there. He bought it at the height of Queen's success, paying £500,000 for what looked like an ordinary Georgian house. Nothing flashy. Nothing dramatic. And that was intentional. Because outside, it was quiet. But inside, it was entirely his world. He redesigned everything. The walls glowed with deep saffron yellow. Bold, warm, impossible to ignore. At the center of the house sat a grand piano, anchoring the space. Many of Queen's most famous songs were created right there, in that quiet room. But what's interesting is this. Why build something so expressive, yet hide it behind such an ordinary exterior? Upstairs, there was a mirrored dressing room. That's where the transformation happened. The private man became the performer the world knew. The white tank top. The presence. The control. Two completely different versions of the same person. And that contrast, it tells you more than any interview ever could. Outside, the garden was just as deliberate. A Japanese-inspired space, filled with magnolia trees and calm, almost disconnected from the city around it. It wasn't built to impress people. It was built to escape them. And that raises a question. Who was Freddie Mercury when nobody was watching? Because offstage, he wasn't the same man. Friends described someone shy, quiet, careful with trust. Very different from the man commanding stadiums. But then again, there were moments that didn't fit that image at all. Like the infamous jazz album launch party in 1978. Wild, chaotic, unforgettable. Or the night he disguised Princess Diana and took her into a London gay bar, where she went completely unnoticed. Or even his failed collaboration with Michael Jackson, which fell apart over a pet llama and creative differences. It sounds almost unreal. So which version of Freddie was real? The truth is, he controlled what people saw. Fame gave him a stage, but it also came with constant attention. And Garden Lodge became his escape from all of that. A place where only a handful of people were allowed in. But who made that list? And why so few? At the center of it all was Mary Austin. She met Freddie before the fame, when he had nothing. She supported him, believed in him, even when success wasn't guaranteed. They were engaged at one point, until Freddie told her the truth about himself. And instead of leaving, she stayed. Not as a partner, but as something deeper. Someone he trusted completely. Then there was Jim Hutton, the man Freddie spent his final years with. Their relationship was quiet, private, and intentionally kept out of the spotlight. They lived together in Garden Lodge, wore matching rings, and built a life that very few people ever saw. But here's the question. Why did Freddie work so hard to keep that part of his life hidden? Even his love for his cats showed a different side of him. He would call home while on tour just to hear them. One of them, Delilah, even got her own song. It was one of the rare places where his guard came down completely. But that kind of openness wasn't something he gave to people easily. And there was a reason for that. Because at one point, someone he trusted broke that trust in a way that changed everything. Paul Prenter had been close to Freddie. Not just professionally, but personally. For years, he was part of his inner circle. But in 1987, that changed. Prenter sold details of Freddie's private life to a tabloid. Personal relationships. Secrets Freddie had worked hard to protect. All exposed. And just like that, everything shifted. Freddie didn't expand his circle after that. He reduced it. The people who remained were the ones who had proven they wouldn't betray him. And that's when Garden Lodge stopped being just a home and became something closer to a fortress. By the late 1980s, that fortress had a new purpose. Because behind those walls, Freddie was dealing with something he refused to make public. He told his band he couldn't tour anymore. That was it.
No explanation.
No discussion. And they respected that. They understood without asking. But the real story was unfolding behind closed doors. And almost nobody knew the full truth. He kept working, recording music, showing up in the studio, even as his health declined, even when it became physically difficult. Because for him, stopping wasn't an option. But here's what makes it even more powerful. The world still didn't know why. His final public appearance was in 1990. After that, he disappeared from view. Rumors were everywhere, but Freddie stayed silent. Until one moment. On November 23, 1991, he released a statement confirming he had AIDS. He said he had kept it private to protect those close to him. And then, just 24 hours later, he was gone. It was the final decision in a life built on control. His story, told his way, at the time he chose. But what happened after his death is just as revealing. For nearly 30 years, Garden Lodge remained untouched, preserved exactly as he left it. Not a museum. Not open to the public. Just private. The way he wanted it. Then eventually, the doors opened. Not fully, but enough. More than 1,500 of his personal items were auctioned. Costumes. Handwritten lyrics. The crown and robe from his final tour. Pieces of a life the public had never truly seen up close. But one item stood out more than all the others. The green front door. Covered in decades of messages from fans. Layers of love, grief, memory. It sold for over £400,000. A single door, carrying the weight of millions of emotions. But what does that say about the man behind it? Because in the end, Garden Lodge didn't reveal scandal. It didn't expose anything damaging. What it showed was something far more unexpected. A private life filled with care, loyalty, love. A man who called home to speak to his cats. Who trusted a small number of people completely. Who kept creating music, even when he knew time was running out. Freddie Mercury spent his life being seen by millions. But Garden Lodge, that was where he chose not to be. And when the world finally got a glimpse inside, what they found wasn't the legend they thought they knew. It was something quieter. Something more human. And maybe that's the part of his story people didn't expect, but needed to understand the most.